and welcome to On the Grid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 4. And we have a bit of a news one, something a little bit different. We are obviously talking about the news that has swept F1. It is the Haas 2024 livery. No, I'm only joking. It is, of course, Hamilton going to Ferrari. Joining with me, as ever, is Adrian Keeser. How are you today, and how did you respond to that news of Hamilton joining your beloved Ferrari?
I was hoping that we would talk about the Haas livery because it is a hot topic and a hot take as the car launch season begins. But no, with Lewis Hamilton, I think we'll get into a little bit of a debate regarding that sort of news that's swept the F1 world. But I I was at work at the time of its announcement, so I was very much bamboozled of what was actually happening. And when I saw people hitting my DMs and going, look what's happening. Many of the news articles regarding Lewis Hamilton joining Ferrari, I didn't think it was true. So I had to research it myself, and yeah, unfortunately, it is true. Um, I suppose it's something different. But yeah, I'm gonna stop waffling, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening between Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton in 2025.
Yes, so I think he signed a 2+1. So he signed for 25 and 26, and then there's the option for a third year. And what I find quite interesting is that Mercedes, his contract extension that he signed last season, he wanted a 2+1 or a 3-year contract. Mercedes were only willing to offer him a 1+1. So they're only going to give him one extra year, which is baffling for me for everything he's done. I can't believe they wouldn't want him on a longer contract. And that's, I think, one of the big draws. So I think it's almost Mercedes have created this situation themselves by not giving the most successful driver in Formula One history the contract he wants. Obviously, there's still a lot of fight and desire for Hamilton to get that eighth, to keep breaking records. So it's just shocking that he hasn't been given the opportunity to basically bow out when he wants to on his terms. And then there was a possibility that Mercedes could replace him for next season. If Lando Norris says he wants to leave McLaren at the end of the season, who's to say Mercedes aren't thinking, well, you got Norris here who's what, 24, 25. He could be our driver for the next decade, set us up. Whereas, Hamilton, how long has he got left in him? He's only got 3 seasons maybe left in him. So a very strange one. What does Lewis Hamilton bring to Mercedes in 2025?
You mean what he brings to Ferrari in 2025? I think is what you wanted to say.
That's what I said.
Um, you said Mercedes.
Oh, did I?
I can still see your kind of. I wouldn't say you're wounding after what's happened in the last couple of days or so.
Well, I would like to extend my application to become a Ferrari fan from the 2025 season,
Yeah.
and that's part of it. So yeah, so instead of when we go to Silverstone this season, I don't think we've announced that. Um, Instead of wearing my Mercedes tops, I'll wear that this year, and if we go next year, I'll be wearing a Ferrari top instead.
Clearly shows a fake fan mentality from Ethan Evans. Um, but I mean, what I had this conversation with my cousin, to be fair, um, and it was a very much one-sided conversation of me saying, right, I really don't want to be involved with Ferrari at all after 2025 because I wouldn't say my hatred. Um, I just I just don't like what. Let me phrase it correctly. I just don't think a British driver suits Ferrari. I I just don't know what there is for me to just go, yeah, Lewis Hamilton is not the suit for Ferrari, purely on the basis that he's British, and purely on the basis that he's been at McLaren and Mercedes and that sort of those sort of teams for the last however many years he's been in the sport. Um, and I mean, what does he bring? He brings a wealth of experience. He brings the Hamilton name into Ferrari. The thing is, I've also seen this thing. When Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari was announced, Ferrari's share price went up by 30% in the 24 hours after, or yeah, in the 24 hours after Lewis Hamilton was announced. So you can already see there that if the content that they create around Lewis Hamilton and the Lewis Hamilton name itself has a massive value to the team. And one other thing, I mean, there'll be a clear battle between Hamilton and Leclerc for that number one. But from what I know, is Lewis Hamilton will be playing second fiddle to Charles Leclerc, and he will. Yeah, you can Ethan. I've seen the face that you pulled, but I generally do feel that Lewis Hamilton won't be. I don't want to say he won't be. He will be wanting to go for that number one role. But to think of Charles Leclerc being the number one driver for the last couple of seasons and Ferrari just bringing Lewis Hamilton to chuck him into the limelight, I don't think that's the right choice for Ferrari. Fred Vasseur and Lewis Hamilton were obviously very close together when they were team principal and driver in GP2. Um, and I just feel that that wealth of experience and that know-how in Formula One may bring Ferrari back to their good days once again. Um, but we spoke about this a couple of months ago when these rumors started circulating. Um, and I brought myself back down to earth and thinking, yeah, this is not going to happen. But it's clearly been happening behind the scenes for quite a while now. I don't think it's just happened out of the blue and Lewis Hamilton's just gone, yeah, had one conversation with Fred Vasseur and he's just signed a deal just like that. I think these conversations have been happening for the past year. Um, and it's no secret that Lewis Hamilton wants success again. He wants that eighth world championship and he wants to do it in style. And I even said in the podcast when we recorded, talking about the rumor about Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari, what better way for Lewis Hamilton to beat Michael Schumacher's record than doing it in Ferrari, doing it with a Scuderia? And I think this is what's going to happen. I think Lewis Hamilton will have a good crack at it in 2025, and then when the regulation changes happen in 2026, I think he'll have a bigger crack at it, and then I don't think he'll be there in 2027. I think 2026 will be his final season, and I think in 2027 and onwards, potentially, he will be kind of behind the scenes and in the paddock, etc., looking after the Ferrari brand. But yeah, I'm still, my mind's still all over the shop regarding this news. It's definitely something different, and it's definitely going to send the silly season crazy in the summer. Um, but I think that's what F1 fans want. They want a little bit of excitement. They want something different, and I think Lewis Hamilton kind of didn't. It brings that different perspective with him joining Ferrari in 2025.
I think I don't know. I don't know how you can sit and say Lewis Hamilton, statistical greatest driver of all time, most world championship, most win in F1, is going to play second fiddle to Charles Leclerc with his
Right,
five
I'm gonna.
Grand Prix
Right,
victories.
I'm gonna butt in here. What's the point of Lewis Hamilton? I mean, he will be gunning for that eighth world championship regardless. But there needs to be a clear cohesion between Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton for them not to clash with each other like George Russell and Lewis Hamilton's done in the last season or so. And if that happens, and if Charles Leclerc's bought into the idea of him being kind of put back a peg for a season or two, and he's happy with that, that's fair enough. But I think both drivers will be wanting to go for that number one role. Leclerc's been in that number one role for the past 3 years. Lewis Hamilton's been a number one driver for the X amount of years he's been in Formula One. So for me to say Lewis Hamilton's going to Ferrari to be a number two driver, it's not completely like me saying he's definitely going to be the number two driver, because there's no definite guaranteed in Formula One. He might be the number one, or Leclerc might be the number one. But they're just clear. There just needs to be a clear cohesion and clear communication in the Ferrari garage that this is happening. Otherwise, Leclerc, who's been in this Ferrari project for so many years, will become uninterested and could potentially leave elsewhere. He could go after 25 or 26. We never know. We've seen stranger things happen.
The thing I'd say to that is that Charles Leclerc knows Lewis Hamilton coming in. There's no guarantees, but also you argue the last 3 seasons with Sainz and Leclerc, has there been a number one driver? You know, Sainz was beating him the entire season up until the last race of the season, when obviously had those problems. Leclerc came through, got second place, and came and beat him in the championship. 2022, there was that clear difference because Sainz was off it in terms of pace. But 2021, Sainz beat Leclerc. So that's 2 years of the 3 seasons they've been teammates so far, where there's an argument where is there been a number one driver? And if there is, has that been Leclerc? Because he's been well beaten for much of those 2 seasons, with 2022 obviously being the massive outlier when Sainz was off the pace with the new regs. But it's been quite close between those two. The thing with Hamilton is, over his 15 years in F1, he's always been on equal pegging with the drivers he's been partnered with. But that's whether that's been Alonso, whether that's been Jenson Button, Nico Rosberg. At the start of the season, it's always been starting fresh, same amount of points, both on 0 points, and then see how it develops. It's only been, as the season's progressed, Hamilton's pulled away from those drivers like Valtteri Bottas, and when Ferrari and Mercedes are in a championship fight, and Hamilton has such an advantage over Bottas, for instance, in the Drivers' Championship, that the call is being made, we need to favour Hamilton because Bottas is too far off to compete for this championship. But when it's been teammate v teammate, it's always been equal status. And I think that will happen again at Ferrari. I think there will be an equal status, and then see how it progresses. But also, like you said, Hamilton and Leclerc do need to work together, because you've got this giant in Red Bull who just seem unstoppable at the minute. You got Max Verstappen winning 19 Grand Prix in a season. So of course, it does need to be the two drivers need to work together. And I think that's something which we haven't quite seen at Mercedes, because weekend to weekend, there's been a bit of a pace difference between the two drivers. But I think what Hamilton brings to Ferrari is that that winning mentality. And I think that's something that Ferrari have been lacking over the last few seasons. Since Vettel's left, really, they've got nobody who's experienced at winning, at delivering. And I know Ferrari have brought in a few engineers from Red Bull and from Mercedes over the last couple of years. There's talk that Bono, is a race engineer, is going to join him. And I think all of these things would be fantastic for Ferrari. And I think even if you get 2 years out of Hamilton, I think he'll stay for longer. I think he'll stay for 3 or 4. Even if you get the 2 years from Hamilton, the level he will bring to Ferrari and the standards that needs to be set every single day, what it'll do for Leclerc, seeing how he operates day in, day out, it'll be sensational. It'll be the best thing that could happen for someone like Charles Leclerc, who's still a young driver, who's still got bags of potential and could be a multiple future world champion. But Hamilton just brings that experience and that know-how of how to find a way to win, which makes it a very exciting prospect, I think, for any Ferrari fan. But in terms of your little jibe, but not a real fan, I think Formula One is such a different sport from anything else. Like, if you've got a football team and a player transfers to their rivals, nobody follows that player across. And if you do, you're a complete wrong un. You don't support a player in football, but that's why Formula One is different, because you do support the driver. I think Ferrari might be the one exception, where you support that team, you are a Ferrari fan because it's bigger than F1. Ferrari is massive. It's the biggest team in F1. But if you've got Alex Albon as at Williams, if he replaces Hamilton, any Alex Albon fan does not say, "Oh, I no longer support," or any Williams fan says, "I no longer support Alex Albon. He's gone to Mercedes. I support this new driver that's replaced him." You follow him. You follow that driver. You follow that driver across, and that you support that driver. Like, I've been a Lewis Hamilton fan since 2007, and the only reason I started supporting Mercedes was because of Lewis Hamilton. So that's why I think Formula One is a bit unique. One of the big questions I've got is, why is Hamilton decided to move now? Obviously, no one knows how the 24 cars are going to perform. Why do you think he's elected to move now before even the season started?
That's a question I think only Lewis Hamilton can answer. But I'll give it a good go at trying to answer it for Lewis Hamilton. Um, in 2026, we've got the regulation changes. And Ferrari did a very, very good job at nailing the regulation changes the last time around. And I think Lewis Hamilton has got a little bit of an inkling of what's going to happen in 2026. And I think he's going to be banking on that year to be his year and for him to bring the eighth world championship. For 2025, I mean, it's going to be a little bit touch and go because it's obviously the last season of the regulation changes before Audi come into the sport, etc. And there's going to be many changes in 2025 due to Lewis Hamilton obviously signing for Ferrari. So I think he's just bought into the project that Fred Vasseur has kind of put down to him and kind of a foundation that he's laid. I mean, Fred Vasseur's only been in the current role for what, a year? This was his first season at Ferrari. So I think the second and third season, which will see Lewis Hamilton step into the Scuderia in the third season of Fred Vasseur's tenure, that season I think will be crucial to kind of measure and bridge the gap to Red Bull if Red Bull are still on top. Um, but I think that I mean, we saw Lando Norris's contract extended, and it would have been a little bit of a fairy tale to see Lewis Hamilton back at McLaren. It would have been a nice fairy tale ending to see his career finished at McLaren, but it's not meant to be. And Lewis Hamilton's always wanted to race for Ferrari, and I think his dream is finally being fulfilled with his move in 2025. But I just think Lewis Hamilton knows deep down that there's a project there. The foundations are currently being laid for Ferrari to kind of come back and win a championship for the first time in a long time. And I think Lewis Hamilton just wants something new. I think he just wants a fresh start. He obviously started his career at McLaren, had a few years there, and he's been at Mercedes ever since the turbo hybrid era, pretty much. So I just think he wants a new challenge, and I think he wants to close out his career on a high. I don't know why Mercedes won't be able to deliver that for him because they've delivered him so many world championships, but only Lewis Hamilton will know why he wants a new challenge and why Ferrari, because it's Lewis Hamilton entering this twilight period of his career, and I think he just wants to cement himself as a great, and I don't know whether he just wants to get one up on Michael Schumacher in Ferrari and get his eighth at Ferrari, but the inkling there is he wants to do it in style and kind of beat Michael Schumacher's record at the Scuderia. So I think the challenge is there. Is the project there potentially? 2026 is probably the year for Lewis Hamilton to do any real damage, but 2024 we could see a new Ferrari, and 2025 could be the end of kind of the Ferrari bringing the dominance back. So we never know. We've got to find out and wait what will happen in the 2 years that Lewis Hamilton has in his contract at Ferrari, and then potentially a third. But the challenge and the challenge and the sort of mindset is there for Lewis Hamilton to get his eighth at Ferrari and do it in style.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, won't it? I think perhaps it is that I think Ferrari must have something. They must have had something up their sleeve to say, look, we've got this. Come to us. You're going to have a good chance in 2025 or 2026. I think that it possibly could also just be that fresh start, like you said. Could just be that he feels like with the last 2 seasons have gone, he just needs a change of environment, a change of pace, and a different setup in order to give himself that fresh start and to be competitive and look to get back on the top step of the podium, which hasn't happened in 2 years, which is crazy. But yeah, it could be something along that. One of I think the most interesting things to speculate is who now replaces Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. Obviously, George Russell's come in. It's had 2 seasons there. For me, there's 3 main candidates. I'm not sure about you, but I've thought about this. I think there's 3 main candidates. You've got Carlos Sainz, which would be simple, straightforward swap. He's a race winner, plenty of podiums. He has that experience. If they want to go for someone a bit more youthful, you've got Alex Albon, who is a very promising up-and-coming driver. He's got that link with Mercedes being at Williams, James Vowles obviously being the team principal. Maybe, Mercedes give Williams Kimi Antonelli for 2025. Obviously, he's a very promising F2 driver in exchange for Albon making the step to Mercedes. Or I think one that would be the most interesting to see is Fernando Alonso. I think this will be an absolute box office if he was to make that move. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, decisions for Mercedes. For me, there's a few candidates there. Obviously, I don't know whether Mercedes particularly want to dip into the reserve driver market and get Mick Schumacher into Mercedes. I think that move will be a little bit too far-fetched. You've obviously got Kimi Antonelli, who's got the links with Mercedes. Frederick Vesti would be a very, very good move, I think. Also giving that youthful look to Mercedes. I think Fred Vesti will kind of be interested in that seat for 2025. He's obviously a promising F2 driver. Carlos Sainz, I think that there's more rumours of him potentially joining Red Bull than Mercedes. So I think that wouldn't be my number one decision, number one choice for Carlos Sainz. I think that Red Bull pull might be a little bit too much for Carlos Sainz to turn down. Obviously, being an ex Red Bull Academy driver, driving for Toro Rosso, etc. But I think what will happen is Alex Albon getting that seat. I think that the bond and the kind of friendship between George Russell and Alex Albon will bring that team a lot of cohesion and a lot of unity. And it will give him an absolutely massively youthful look. And that driver pairing may not even be replaced for the next 10 or so years, with them kind of being stalwarts in Formula One at the moment. Um, I just don't know who will replace him. There's so many options. Mercedes have got the whole F1 market to scout and to get George Russell the right partner for 2025. I mean, you can look at Teo Pourchaire, for example. Is Felipe Drugovich good enough to join Mercedes from the Aston Martin kind of squad? So Mercedes have a job on their hands to replace Lewis Hamilton. Don't get me wrong, Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion. And he'll be a massive miss to the team, but they've got to make the right decision and getting the right person in to kind of replace what they're losing. They won't ever replace the amount of wins or the amount of world championships that he's got unless a certain world champion in Sebastian Vettel decides to join Mercedes. But I think there might be a few links of Vettel joining Audi in 2026, which could be a cheeky return. But yeah, it's going to be a hard decision, but I think Mercedes have to take a while processing what's happened and getting the correct person in to replace Lewis Hamilton in 2025?
Yeah, I think there's a few options that you listed there. Like I said, I think the three standout ones for me. I think Carlos Sainz is the most unlikely of those three, but I feel that the amount of noise and publicity that Hamilton created by going to Ferrari, do Mercedes need to kind of almost match that, bring in a big name of their own, Fernando Alonso, um, to kind of make a statement and say, look, we're not no pushovers. We're bringing in one of the best drivers F1 has ever seen, which is an option. And it'd be very interesting to see what Alonso can do in a top car, which we haven't seen him in since 2012. And we know what happened then. Obviously, battle for the championship and almost won it. So I think Alex Albon is probably the smarter decision, like he said. But I think there's just a little bit of every single F1 fan that would love to see Fernando Alonso in that car. In terms of what this means for Carlos Sainz, the man going out of Ferrari, you said there's some Red Bull links. Obviously, the Audi links have been there for a long time. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. Does he almost take a step down to Audi for the time being with how bad they were last season, which would be a project which would take a few years to come back to the level where he is now, maybe even longer? Or does he look for that second seat at Red Bull? Does he look at that other Mercedes seat and think, I'm a top driver, I've got a couple of race wins here, I deserve one of those seats?
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't listen to what you said. What were you on about?
Where does Carlos Sainz go?
Oh, I did feel like you were talking about Carlos Sainz. Like I said, Red Bull. I think Red Bull is the clearest of chances that Carlos Sainz will get at kind of getting a better team than Ferrari. And the links are there. Like I said, kind of previously, an ex Red Bull Academy driver drove for Toro Rosso. And I think that would be a nice little step up for Carlos Sainz, and I think he deserves it. But then you've got the giant of Daniel Ricciardo fighting for that seat as well for 2025. So will Carlos Sainz eventually even get a seat, or will he have to do a step back? It's There's loads of if, buts, or maybes surrounding Carlos Sainz's future, but I think Red Bull links are there, and I think they're clear to see that Red Bull are gunning for Carlos Sainz and they want to sign him. And I just think why not? Why not Carlos Sainz goes for a punt? But then, on the other hand, will the same happen to Carlos Sainz that happened to Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly, or is Carlos Sainz's experience that he's had in Formula One enough to keep him afloat in that number two seat? Loads of if buts or maybes heading into 2025, that's for sure.
It will definitely be interesting to see how this unfolds with the wide driver market, and the rest of the silly season with all of those drivers' contracts expiring. But I think that's all we'll cover in this episode. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week where we'll be looking forward to the new season. Thank you. Bye.